Hi, my name is Rose, and the book of Job is my topic for discussion today. The book contains 42 chapters with the central theme of human suffering and how it relates to God's justice. During this time, the theme of human suffering went against the ancient Israelites' beliefs because they often thought that God rewarded the righteous and punished the wicked. As we get into the story, we will see that bad things can happen to good people, but God is still in control of everything. The book invites the reader to wrestle with the idea of why bad things happen to good people and how we know that God is present even when there is no clear understanding. The book can be explained in three parts. The first part talks about Job's life and how he began to suddenly suffer. It gives the details of what Job lost, which included his wealth, his family, and even his health. Then the second part is the longest part, focusing on the conversation between Job and his three friends. Each one of them had their own ideas of why Job was suffering. They even suggested that he had done something wrong. And finally, the third part, God speaks, and we learn about Job's outcome. The beginning of the book of Job 1 and 1, we learn that Job was blameless and upright man who feared God and avoided evil. Basically, this is saying he was someone who lived a good and faithful life. As we dig deeper into the first chapter, the story shifts to a heavenly scene. In the heavenly scene, God summons the Son of God of what we would call his heavenly court to come before him. And Satan joined also. God asked Satan where he had come from. And Satan begins to say in chapter 1, verse 7, that he was going to and fro on earth and from walking up and down it. Satan is telling God that he had been roaming the earth, going back and forth, observing what was happening. Satan has been on the lookout, seeing who is faithful or not. Now that's when God asked Satan, have you considered my servant Job? God goes on to praise and brag on Job, telling them how there is none like him on earth, perfect, good, and faithful. But Satan interrupts. Just imagine it like today. Your boss gather everyone together in the office and begin to brag about one individual. Then someone interrupts and say, now wait. The only reason he or she is doing so well is because you've been giving them special favors. Well, this is what happens as God was bragging on Job. Satan interrupts and challenges God's claim. Satan began to tell God that the only reason Job is so good is because you've blessed him abundantly. Satan let God know that he's given him so much large family, wealth, and has placed a hedge of protection around him. Satan wants to prove to God that Job was only serving him because of all his possessions. In chapter 1, verse 11, Satan tell God, but now stretch forth thy hand and strike all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. In other words, Satan is telling God, remove all his riches, and he will be like everyone else and curse you to your face. This is where the story takes a turn in verse 12, because God gives Satan permission. He said, all right, everything he has is in your hand, but do not touch his soul. Then the chain of bad events began to happen, which leads to Job's struggle. It appears there was one bad news after another for Job. He was told all his livestock was dead, his servants were gone, and even his children had died. Everything Job owned was gone, but instead of cursing God, Job fell to his knees and worshiped him. In verse 21, Job says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." This shocked Satan because instead of Job cursing God, through all this tragedy, Job praised God. Now, in the second chapter, Satan goes back to God because Job had remained faithful to God, and tells him in the second chapter, the 5th verse, "But put forth thy hand now, and touch his bones and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face." And again, God gives Satan permission, but under another condition, that he do not kill him. Well, as the story goes on, it tells that Job falls seriously sick. He's afflicted with painful boils covering his entire body. These painful sores covered him from head to toe. He was physically suffering. His condition deteriorated to such an extent that his 3 friends urged him to confess any hidden sin. But Job continued to say that he had done nothing wrong. His wife even asked him to curse God and die because he was in such a bad condition. Well, starting in chapter 3, Job began to question God. He even cursed the day he was born. Job began to express his anger and frustration to God. He was desiring an explanation. As human, we all have a breaking point. Job began to accuse God of being unjust. He also continued to debate with his friends, who kept on insisting that he must have sinned because his suffering didn't make any sense. Job was demanding an answer from God. And this was a long, drawn-out process that goes on all the way through chapter 38. But then God shows up. In chapter 38, God basically says, "Job, who are you to question me?" Then God takes Job on this incredible spiritual tour and asks him questions about creation. Like, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? He shows Job the earth and how it was structured, and he let him see things that Job didn't even know about God. Job now see the wisdom and the power of God. And after God finished speaking to Job, Job becomes so humble and repent. He recognized that God is all powerful and all knowing. So in chapter 47, God restores Job, because through all that he had been through, Job still remained faithful and never abandoned God. So God blessed Job with double for everything he has lost. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I hope you have a great evening.